Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask some questions, which I'm going to flip in here. We have an individual who had a broken arm, and it's just come out of the cast. He's back to training again, and he's talking about doing some different sort of training to get everything balanced back out, to regain muscle he's lost and everything else. And so let's talk about that for a minute. Let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on my crafting a little bit, and let's kind of get into the nuts and bolts of this. All right, one of the things that's important to remember when you have a broken limb or something that's in a cast, a lot of people make a really, really big mistake. All right, they will sometimes not train at all or limit their training because they don't want to get imbalanced. They're afraid that they're going to get imbalanced because, one side of the body is going to get bigger, the other's going to atrophy, everything else while they're training. And so they tend to back way off and they tend to lose a lot of muscle mass. Now, that being said, if you're carrying a decent amount of muscle, I think this is a really, really big mistake. So first of all, let's jump back to what to do when you're in a cast. Now, a lot of times you're going to be limited in exercises you can do. Balancing bars can be hard. Even doing deadlifts and stuff can be difficult, but you can still squat with a broken arm. There's a lot of things you can do with a cast on an arm or a leg. You have to be creative, learn to train. But the thing is, do not be afraid of training, because there's an interesting phenomenon that researchers noticed about 15 years ago. I saw studies on this way back, even before the internet had all these studies that we have today. I saw a few different studies done, and you know what they found? They found that when you train one side of your body, when they take people and they only trained one side of their body, even on a machine, the other side grew. It didn't grow as much, but the other side grows. Now, that's an interesting thing for people to consider. And that's one of the reasons, that you really have to be screwing some stuff up to get left to right muscle imbalances. And I've explained in the past a lot about why that happens with side loading the body. But when you train your right side or your left side, the other side actually grows a little bit from it. So what does that tell you? It tells you there's a systematic element to muscle growth. All right, there is a systematic component to it that your body recognizes that if one side of the body needs to grow, the other side needs to also. It won't always be in proportion, but it will grow. Now, incidentally, what's the best thing you can do to prevent from losing muscle mass at any given time? Lift weights, right? You want to lift weights. Lifting weights helps you preserve muscle tissue in any situation. So if you have one arm or leg or something in a cast, you should be training the side that you can still train. You should be training it normally. Maybe not pushing progression, but try to hold on to what you have. Why? It will slow down the atrophy of the limb in the cast. All right? It will slow down the atrophy because you are giving it some growth stimulation. Now, if you can cut the amount of muscle you lose in that limb that's in a cast in half, it's going to make it so much easier to regain it. So do not be afraid to train the other side of your body when you're in a cast. Don't worry about the imbalances, because you know what? It's going to be a lot easier to regain the muscle when you only have to regain half as much because you've only lost it in one side of the body. And when you've lost less in that side, it's going to be even easier. And that's a point you need to consider. There is a system-wide taxation involved in growing muscle. All right, and so if you've got to grow both arms or legs back to their previous size and other muscles associated with them, it's going to be twice as much work on your body. It's going to take more food, it's going to take more protein, it's going to take all sorts of other stuff. It's going to be slower because you're having to grow it in other places. All right, so if you can reduce the muscle loss everywhere by training the main side, because obviously you won't lose anything on the good side, and you might only lose half as much as you would have on the other side, it is absolutely worth it. Now, when you go back to training, what I would recommend, even though I'm big on power training, you know what I would do if I got out of a cast? I would be doing tons of hypertrophy work. Even though I don't like that term, because I know you can grow off low reps, I would be focused upon gaining muscle, stimulating gaining muscle as quickly as possible. Even if that meant higher volume training, whatever trainings that I don't even like, I would go for the most efficient, effective means of gaining muscle, period. I would probably do some higher volume training. I would probably stay mostly up around 8 to 10 reps. Maybe even some higher rep stuff for the one side that's growing a little slower, that has atrophied. Why? Well, because you can always go back and regain neural efficiency. You can go back and train for power. You can always go into a power phase later. But you're better off regaining the lost muscle tissue as quickly as possible. And here's why. the less time that has passed since you lost muscle, the easier it is to regain it. All right, and if you're not doing the most efficient training methods, you've had more time where you've had the missing muscle gone. Now, if you've been a cast for 6 weeks and you train to the other side, you've only lost a little bit of muscle. You're still easily within easy muscle memory range. You can go back and probably, if you did 4 to 6 weeks of pure hypertrophy type training and you did the other stuff I recommended while in it, if you spent 6 to 8 weeks in a cast, you will regain all the muscle you lost. And you can extend it out to a longer phase. You don't necessarily have to do 3-week blocks. You could just come in and just use serious progressive overload with a lot of volume for the side, or for your whole body, and the other side will catch back up. That's what people need to remember. You don't even need to go to dumbbells. You don't need to go to machines. You don't even need to do extra work on that side. A lot of people say things like, well, I'm going to come in and do a ton of isolation work for that, that side that shrank. You don't need to do that. Just train both and let the weak side be the limiting factor with what you can do on the bar. Go ahead and do your barbell rows, do your barbell bench, do your barbell overhead press. Do them even, and the weak side will be the side that gets the most stimulation. But you need to remember that if you're stimulating both sides, there is carryover both directions. You're going to regain, in my opinion, I think that's the best strategy to regain the muscle that you've lost on that side that shrunk down, is to come in and just do tons of hypertrophy work on big heavy barbell movements. Because again, the weak side will be your limiting factor, and you're still stimulating good growth on the other side. And remember, we look at the other studies. What happens when you train one side of the body? It does stimulate growth on the other. All right, so you're going to balance back out as long as you go back to balance training, to where you focus on moving a bar evenly, not side loading your body, not doing grinders, doing clean, perfect reps that evenly load the body. And you do, again, time-proven effective hypertrophy work. Regain all your size you've lost. Don't worry about the explosive power. Don't worry about separating stuff into power days, hypertrophy days. I would come in and just do pure hypertrophy type training to rebalance everything as quickly as possible. And I think that's the best strategy for doing so, because it's going to rebalance you the most quickly. Your body is eager to regain muscle mass. It lost muscle. Your muscle memory is still fresh there. Your body still knows that it had muscle very, very recently that it lost, and you immediately force it back into the most effective means of gaining muscle possible. We could argue that, okay, some of these higher volume hypertrophy style training is only slightly better, but because it's slightly better, you're going to shave days off of how long it takes to regain that muscle, because the longer muscle's been gone, the less effective muscle memory is. All right, so if you come in and you do it as quickly and efficiently as possible, you're going to get rebalanced back out. Once you're rebalanced back out, then you can worry about other types of training, going back to your normal undulating periodization or your normal block periodization or whatever it is you do. Regain that lost muscle as quickly as possible. Get things back to normal. That's going to be the best way to do things. And so to rephrase that, to start over and paraphrase all that again, if you're in a cast, you need to train the side of your body that you can train. Again, you don't have to progress on it, but at least try to maintain, because that will help you hold on to the muscle inside the cast. It will absolutely help. Again, this is pretty well known that when you train one side of the body, it does stimulate the other. All right, so you aren't going to lose as much muscle. And then if you come back in and you go back to just, again, barbell work, using good technique so that you don't shift one side of the body more than the other. You're not doing grinding reps and sloppy form and shit. Come in and do clean form on a bunch of heavy barbell movements. Work up in the 8 to 10, 8 to 12 rep range for the next 6 weeks. Again, fairly high volume training if you can squeeze it in. Regain all that lost muscle. And you know what? I promise you, if you do everything that I just described, even if your arm or leg was in a cast for 8 weeks, that I bet you 6 weeks after you're done, 6 weeks after you're done, after you come out of that cast, you're not going to be able to look at that arm or that leg until it was in a cast. Unless there's scar tissue or pins or whatever in there that's limited you. If it's just a clean bone break that's healed, you will be able to get it back to normal within 6 weeks if you do what I said. And it's going to be the fastest, most efficient way to do so. And you don't have to let it set you back. You're going to be back where you were. All right, it isn't as big of a setback as you think as long as you do this stuff correctly. And it's pretty straightforward. That's what I would personally do. That's what I would personally recommend to anyone out there doing that. There's no need to let yourself atrophy down And there's no need to do any sort of convoluted training. You need to come in and focus on regaining that lost size as quickly as possible at the cost of all other performance elements, because you can always regain those other performance elements once you put the size back on. So again, there's no need to even periodize your training. There's no need to mix stuff up. There's no need to do that. Keep it simple. Regain that lost muscle. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.